what advice can you give to the early stage founder that's trying to figure out who to connect with, trying to figure out how to make meaningful relationships? What type of advice would you give them?
If there's any sort of conference, if there's any sort of meetup group, like that has anything to do with what you're doing, even slightly, I would say those are really important. If there are people who are listening who are like too far to go to events or just can't make it happen, financial reasons, whatever, I would say...
Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Wealth podcast. I'm your host, Andres Sanchez, and today I have Nikhil Vimal, the co-founder of Rex. Rex is an advertising and marketing tool. We're going to dive into exactly what the tool is, exactly what Nikhil and his co-founder are building, and talk about his journey as an entrepreneur to try and help any of you entrepreneurs or founders that are listening right now. Nikhil, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. A pleasure to be on.
Yeah. And I like to go right into things and give you the ability to let us know who you are, what you've built, and then let's start diving in and learning about what Rex is.
Yeah, let's totally do it. Yeah. So my name is Nikhil Vimal. I've been in tech and startups and like entrepreneurship now for over a decade, primarily leaning towards like technology innovation, Web 2.0, then going into AI, and have been in AI for quite a while. I advise for a lot of startups. I've angel invested in startups. I've started startup communities, done the whole thing, college dropouts. So took a pretty traditional route while I lived in the Bay Area. So definitely a traditional route for startup people, but untraditional for the rest of the country and the rest of the world usually. But I've been primarily focused on, and I can give a quick pitch here. Rex is basically, the way that I like to describe it is it's you have like a chief marketing officer, and Rex is your chief marketing agent. It's an AI tool that you basically hire on to do your marketing and advertising for you, essentially, in a sense, almost kind of like closer to driving a Tesla with like full self-driving, where, you are still the business owner and you still have the foundational knowledge to get a product off the ground, to, get, different SKUs out, or, get your service, to the right people. But Rex essentially helps take care of all the marketing side of that, right? So you work on the fulfillment, you work on what you do best, and Rex's goal as the product continues to develop, it's starting in the ad space, but we'll have other features too that focus on things like content creation, social media management, all the fun stuff. And we're leveraging generative AI, of course, and the rise of machine learning to allow that and give it to democratize basically access to this product for primarily small businesses, consumer product companies, and then e-commerce as well, and creators, actually creator economy too. So yeah, that's a little bit about that.
Amazing. And I'm already brewing up questions on the things that I'm curious about, but I'd like to, like we were talking about before we hit record, most of the audience here is that wannabe founder, trying to become a founder. I want to cater to them. You clearly have an amazing background and a ton of experience. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the early journey in your career, dropping out of college, jumping into this world of entrepreneurship. What got you excited? What did that time in your life look like?
Yeah, that was a fun time in my life, I would say. The real story, crazy enough, actually starts in high school, like freshman year. I was getting kind of bored. I think it was like I like broke my wrist or something, and so sports, like I used to swim, I used to play piano, I used to do all the stuff that like regular like kids do in high school, right? And I was like, I just had some extra time on my hands, and so I kind of discovered through like my love for like gaming at the time and stuff like that, like just the idea of like programming, right? Like what does modding Minecraft look like? What is like creating all these like custom skins? Like what is this like just for fun, just as an experiment? And I got really into it. And through that, I also discovered, you discover things through that community, like building websites for your guilds, or, it was like WordPress was taken off. So people were writing like hobby, blogs and stuff about gaming or music or whatever they loved. And I started to get the sense, like Tumblr was huge at the time and people could customize that with code too. So I was kind of getting the sense of like, all right, like there's something there. And I've always grown up hearing about, people in robotics or your Mark Benioffs and Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Like building something when they're young and then like being able to leverage code, primarily programming or some sort of unique skill that they have to start a company, scale it young, and then like just become like retire early, right? Which sounded great. One thing led to another, and before long, I was sort of like focusing on. I started my own LLC right when it became legal at the age of 13, where I'm from, and then focused on actually running it as like an agency and consultancy. So I wouldn't tell anybody my age. Like that was the crazy thing. And while I was kind of like learning things and going to conferences and like teaching myself, I would in turn build that, those same websites or build web applications or whatever, mobile applications for clients all around the world. Well, again, didn't know like anything about me other than the fact that I was delivering a product and I was delivering an outcome, which was pretty sick. And basically monopolized it was either studying and going to high school, and it was that for a while. And that sort of all culminated in running my first tech startup, which actually got to an accelerator right at the end of my high school career. So, got to move out to Austin for about 6 months, or even maybe it was even a little longer than that, and spent a lot of time in Texas going through a startup accelerator, which teaches you very specifically, okay, like maybe you know how to build a website and deliver it to clients, and maybe you know how to like, build something tangible with code, but like, how do you turn that into product management and product strategy where you have one product and software as a service that needs to scale up into something that big clients can use and that you can have for hundreds of thousands of customers, not just for somebody who needs a website and shows it off to visitors, right? It's actually like, what does that look like? What does innovation look like? And so around that time, I partnered up with a good friend of mine in the industry. We're not living in the same state. We just knew each other through online, but happened to be the same age. And yeah, got clients like we were working with clients like Marriott and La Quinta and Wyndham at the time, like in the hospitality world. Try to build AI in that space. Unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't what it is now, and so we didn't quite hit the timing. But it was a cool like 2 year experiment of building a company, again raising some money for it, going to these big clients, doing paid pilots, learning all about that fun stuff. And then, yeah, I mean, from there it was off to the races. I went to school. I'll be completely honest, I strictly went to school to try to get access to investors. I'm not from the Bay Area, but I moved out there for a short time strictly and just to be able to be in the city and have like a bit of a fallback in case anything happens, because startups are always scary. But the whole purpose was to just go and be like in the center of the city, network like hell, right? And then like get my startup to the next stage and drop out of school, like, after I've leveraged that. And so that is kind of the startup actually failed a couple of years into, or about a year and a half into going to school. But at the same time, I still dropped out anyways, because even after that startup failed, I kept doing my own things as an independent consultant, worked as the head of product at different startups, like sort of did school on the side again, just to build connections. And eventually that led to me starting another business. And that business is what I was doing previous to Rex, which was for about 5 years, I was in enterprise artificial intelligence consulting, which is a culmination of all my work of being a technical person, running a company, selling to big companies, running product, and then how can I take that and scale it to, your NFLs, L'Oreal's, Live Nations of the world, right? Where they're looking for people to build their R&D departments, looking for people to build like a lot of AI even before ChatGPT, and for customer service, for whatever customer experience, retail, you name it. And yeah, that's what got me into a lot of interesting spaces once you're in there, where I had the opportunity to work with a lot of like very high level people, but then take some of that experience that I was learning and bring it to startups, help them get access to these big clients, things like that. And yeah, I guess I'm sharing the whole story, but we can work backwards too. And that led to doing Rex now, where I have partnered up with other people who are now serial founders like myself. Some of my co-founders are like tech or former like Fortune 500 executives. So I speak their language, even though I don't have the same experience. And now we're trying to democratize like marketing, right? Like giving everybody a CMO. And that's, like I said, like a culmination of all the work I've done over the years of trying to, figure out like where AI is the most useful, how to get it to a lot of people at once or a lot of enterprises at once. And yeah, kind of like living the dream, I guess. So, but we can work backwards. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff I can dig into that we can go into. So yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you had the average high school and college experience for every kid in the world. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I would love to. I mean, so much was just talked about there. I would
Yeah.
love to go back to the
Yeah.
end of high school, start of college you.
Sir.
Obviously, not the typical life for
No,
a
not at
16
all.
to an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
How did you go about balancing trying to be a normal, like having fun and being with your friends' life, but also diving so deep into this passion? Because I know there's people listening right now that are probably in the same shoes as you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what advice could you give to them?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the balance portion. I didn't do sports, for example, right? I had to just cut that all out because I was spending the majority of my time programming, and so it was like home workouts versus, doing the traditional JV varsity, like all that kind of fun stuff, right? But that being said, it's kind of interesting because I found a lot of great mentors while I was going through the process of starting my own business, who were like, I wouldn't say close to my age, but they were maybe like 20, so they weren't exactly like they weren't like in their 40s, 50s. I did have those mentors too, but those people became friends who kind of helped me find like some form of serendipity and balance in like what I was doing and helped like kind of build that motivation. And even if they didn't live where I lived, like I would talk to them a lot. I was very active in online communities, very much a Twitter user back in that day where it was, and it still is pretty tech heavy, but even now it remains, or even back then it was even more powerful, got me my first clients and stuff like that. So there was a lot of that, like using the digital world to, stay social and stay like balanced as a person and as a student, I guess as a student of like life, not just of school too. Yeah, with high school, like I got to be honest, it was pretty much on autopilot and early college too. Like I did have my high school friends, I did have college friends, but I also moved across the country to go to college. So for me, it was sort of like I had to sort of reset. But when I came there, like came to the city itself, I had older friends who were already from the tech world that I knew. And I made a lot of great college connections too before I left. But it was like a little bit less focus on maybe the day to day of that and just kind of like studying hard and seeing where that could take me and just kind of seeing, the focus was more on like where can my career and sort of trajectory and lifestyle that I was trying to gun for could get me. So yeah, it was not easy by any sense of the word, but it's like interesting because I think without the internet, you couldn't have pretty much done any of the stuff that I could have done, right? And so for me, it was actually online communities that really, really. I mean, I can share quickly one way I stayed like sane and still felt sort of my age was I actually started a community of it was called Young Startups back in like 2016. So there was like, or even 2015, so sophomore, junior year of high school, and that was it was for startup founders under the age of 25. It was a giant Slack group. And since then, there have been many more Discord and Slack and Reddits now that have come up. But back then, that wasn't really a big thing yet. And I think we got up to like 2,600 people in that group from all over the world and still people I call friends. I bumped into one of them at an event here in Chicago where I live right now, like 2 months ago. It was the most random thing. I haven't seen this guy or talked to him since like probably then, but it was like a random, like, oh, your profile picture you look like someone I used to know or something, right? And so there was still the sense of like you could be young and you could still be like living life sort of in that angle a little bit and have a lot of these relatable stories. But it was like the big picture was sort of the ambition was what was pushing you forward in life or pushing me forward in life. So yeah, the balance, maybe there's some things I still went to prom, right? I still went to
Yeah.
like, I still went to college, like games and stuff like that, right? But it was sort of like I said, it was almost playing in the background itself out. And I got to live a little bit of this like double life, which at 25 right now is like so funny to think back on because right now it's like that's just adulting as it always will be moving forward in life. But back then it was like a bigger deal, right? So hopefully that's like some good insight into that
Yeah, no,
mindset and
that's
world.
fantastic. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. And it's
Yeah.
funny, it looks like you were very early on the community. That's like the most popular thing to build right now. And
Yeah.
everybody's got a community and all these
Yep.
companies like school. And you were doing that. I mean, a community
Yep.
with 2,500 people in 2015 right now
Yeah. It was crazy.
would be extremely impressive. Um,
Yeah.
you obviously have had a lot of exposure to startups, a lot of exposure to early businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the pillars that, or I guess, check the box things that need to happen in a company early on for it to at least have a chance of success? Because you can't say any company has a chance to fail. It's like one of the hardest
Yeah.
things to do. But what are some
Yeah.
of those check the box things that you notice that are a necessity for some of these businesses to actually be successful?
Yeah, there's a few, and it's like it's weird because I used to read all the, and I'm going to clarify this because I'm even as a personal brand, I'm trying to diverge from things. But there's the original books like Zero to One by Peter Thiel and like the Lean Startup and like all these amazing books that have a really good foundation for what it used to be. I would say probably circa like the era where Dropbox was a new thing, right? Or like Mailchimp was a new thing. Like all these companies were barely off the ground, and I think it's really changed since then. So I'm only clarifying that because my pillars might sound kind of crazy, but as I've looked at like as I'm working in a like business right now that works with other small businesses, I'm noticing a lot of really interesting things come up. So first of all, it's like team. And that doesn't mean it's wrong to be a solopreneur in any ways, but like your support group is as vital as it is. Like I think there's a lot of people who believe I just need to hunker down, work really hard, but like mentors, advisors, partnerships, all those kind of things. When I have those leverage, even co-founders, honestly, like when I've leveraged those things, I've always noticed growth and opportunity scale like tenfold really, really quickly when I'm prioritizing in the businesses where I was like just kind of trying to like silo myself out. Like I just noticed there wasn't really, I maybe had people I talked to, but it definitely was not enough. They weren't involved in the business. They were just giving me, like, just answering questions. But if you can get some incentive or just ask people to like give you value directly on what you're working on and have them be like a part of your world and a part of your web, and let them in a little bit, it's crazy how much that helps. So that's not team in the traditional sense, but it's like who's around you, right? Your environment, your surrounding, it is basically like a tribe of some sort, right? What you're building. So I think that's become crucially important, especially when we're thinking about how saturated the business world is and how easy it is for someone who might be working on their own to get burned out or just like, it's very easy to be like, I remember myself feeling like, man, why am I missing out on anything? And then when you introduce these surrounding people, I know what I was missing, right? That's
Mhm.
one of the pillars. So definitely something I promote. Again, doesn't have to even be another co-founder. Just what are the people around you? What are the partnerships that you have? What are the ecosystem relationships you have? So that's important. And how can it help your business too? I think the other thing that I've started to realize has definitely become more important is the power of the personal brand, which like this one's kind of weird because it's like I haven't been running businesses lately that could really benefit. Like my last agency, the consulting thing, I still had a personal brand, but it was very, very enterprise heavy, which meant like I went to the same conferences with like my clients and then I built a personal reputation from there. And and I actually will say in the early days, I had podcasts and blog posts. After a while, word of mouth was keeping things more afloat, but it was like, I will say that, I mean, all that is to say, it was still important at some point in the journey. And it's like, I would even recommend people do more than what I did, where you actually do continue that personal brand of having like your own podcast or your own like Substack or something like that. Not just at the beginning when you're getting like off the ground, but really throughout the whole journey. I think creator oriented companies, especially in the world of like consumer or e-commerce and stuff, is like, that's the future. That's how you stand out, is who is the face behind the product and the brand, and why should you buy from them? Why should you trust them? Where does the authenticity, the tone come from? So I think those like that concept of like a personal brand being a growth vehicle is like super important, has become a very big pillar that I wish I had explored more back in the day, but I was kind of going off of the tech stuff. And I think the other thing too is understanding, the like this last one's like an interesting and almost pseudo controversial pillar to some, but it's like understanding what the benefits are between like a venture backed and a bootstrap business, right? Is like what are the real, what could you really be getting from going out to investors if you don't necessarily need them, right? Like it used to be a time where it's like, no, you need to raise money, you need to go through an accelerator, whatever. These days it's like, well, if you are making revenue early, like retention of your ownership in a company is a lot more powerful. And as someone who sold a company now, who I had basically 90% ownership of, like I know the value like really well now, right? Like I really understand where that comes from, and understanding sort of that, like those caveats. It doesn't mean that like there's certain businesses like in, for example, that have a lot of regulation, or in deep tech or something like that, where venture capital is very important, but understanding that bootstrapping is still an option, and being careful how you leverage, business credit or business loans and business debt in general. Like people just have to be, I'm just always shout that out as like, understand your options as well as you can before even getting started. Don't try to just assume I'm just going to open a business bank account and see what happens, or I'm just going to try to raise investment and then maybe later we'll raise enough money. Like try to really look into that properly. So yeah, I guess those are like, it's like, I would say it's like team, and then, what it kind of takes to scale your business from a personal brand standpoint, and how that can help. And then also like understanding that like bootstrap versus venture back world. I think those are three things that I wish just were talked about more, but are still sort of like they're gaining traction right now, but they weren't for a while because these books and these things had very standard like procedure, which I don't totally agree with anymore. So yeah,
Yeah, I want to dive into two of those things. First,
sure,
I want to start with the team aspect,
yeah,
the getting good people around you. Obviously, you've had a long career in networking and
Mhm.
gaining the trust of a lot of different people. What advice can you give to the early stage founder that's trying to figure out who to connect with, trying to figure out how to make meaningful relationships? What
Mhm.
type of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think that's great. So yeah, I will credit a lot of my career success not only to the digital world but also the real world, where I was living in Minneapolis when I started this whole thing, and it's not a tier one tech city for sure, but at the time that I was there, and I mean I think still even now, like, and in a lot of like big enough American cities, if there's any sort of conference, if there's any sort of meetup group, like that has anything to do with what you're doing, even slightly, I would say those are really important. And or if you can go to a city, like take a little road trip 4 hours away or something to a city that has something like that. In your early days of getting started as a business owner or just an entrepreneur, period, that physical face to face element is game changing. I do agree that there is a lot of options with like Twitter and Instagram and stuff to build your personal brand, but those in person connections when you're actually making like friends in the industries and not just like digital acquaintances, those are people that can really help inspire your ideas, help become part of that team. Like there is an in person aspect. Doesn't mean you can't find that those people online in different communities as well, but that in person sort of serendipity, I think is really like the right word. This is the best word to think about it is so powerful in getting you like getting that growth that I was talking about, where there's people who are helping your business and there are people who are actually there to help you in your business, right? And so I would say, like some quick networking tips, like obviously authenticity helps. I think being able to be somebody who follows up with people, not in an annoying way, but like you do the work like early on, right? It's not people are going to forget about you. Like that's the way it is unless you're building a relationship. And again, really focusing on like I've met a lot of people who do it so wrong where it's like, I'm just going to reach out to this person and I'm going to make sure it's like strictly business, right? We're not going to talk about it's going to jump in right into insights and analytics. And it's like, why not just talk about like how your day's going, right? And why not start off with like what interests they have and you have, like offering that mutual value even outside of a business point and just having like, again, making friends in the industry is really powerful and has helped me out the most. I think if I followed too much of what public speakers and networkers recommend, I think everything I did would have been transactional, and people wouldn't have wanted to help me in like it would have been harder to build a tribe around me and people who believed in me. It would have just been people I reach out to ask for advice, and that would have been the relationship. Nothing wrong with those two, but there is like a clear delineation and a clear difference. So I would say those are some like those big tips, and I think in general like and yes, if there are people who are listening who are like too far to go to events or just can't make it happen, financial reasons, whatever, I would say like there are a lot of amazing communities online. And in those communities, try to get people on calls, right? Try to be like, hey, let's do a digital coffee chat. Let's have like something that's face to face and not just like DMs or threads or back and forth emails. Like really get to know the person, and you'll see how quickly that makes a tribe and not just like digital acquaintances, like I said. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you mentioned about not being extremely transactional. I agree
Mhm.
100% that a lot of the people you listen to online and a lot of the conversations you hear online are like, you need to bring value immediately. You need to come in with XYZ. And like, that's
Mhm.
all good. But fostering real, authentic relationships are the ones that will take you the longest. If I think
Mhm.
about the 3 years that I've been connecting with people online and building a brand, the only people I still talk to are the ones that I genuinely made a relationship with. I've had
Yep.
hundreds of people help me and give me advice. And like you said, that's fine. But
Mhm.
actually wanting to make a genuine connection will take you the longest way, in my opinion. So I love to hear that that's something that you agree with as well. And
Yeah.
for the people that, like you mentioned, don't have the ability to go to these events and get out there,
Mhm.
the online world will take you so far. You
Oh
will
yeah.
meet
Oh yeah.
so many amazing people. I can't count the amount of people who have helped me along my journey that I have not
Mhm.
met in person to this day.
Yeah.
And don't I want people listening and watching to make sure that you're not limiting yourself by thinking that relationships that you build online cannot be as strong or stronger than relationships
Yeah.
you build in person.
Agreed. Agreed. Helps to have a mix of both if you can, is kind of what I'm
Yeah.
getting at. Like really, there can be differences in between either, but both are fine options. To your point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about that bootstrap versus venture capital. You mentioned
Yeah.
that it's something that you want more people to talk about. It's still not something that's widely spoken of.
Yep.
I have never raised capital, so I can't sit here and give
Sure.
any good advice, but I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are some of the things people should be looking out for? What are some of the things people should be thinking of when they're trying to decide on that choice of should I raise or should I bootstrap?
Yeah. And it's interesting too because it really depends on the business, right? Not every
Yep.
business is venture backable, and not every like it's hard to sort of see. But I'll give that advice. And again, it's like it's coming from my perspective. I think there's a lot of other perspective. If you're in e-commerce, I think no one would even talk about venture backed unless you're like you know a I don't know, Chamberlain Coffee or something like that, like these celebrities who can go out and get that money. Although I think there's like new funding sources that are coming there too. But basically, all that is to say that what's I think interesting for people to consider is that when it comes to venture capital, it used to be a little bit more. I would say like pretty transactional where you would get venture capital and you would get some help from venture capitalists, but it's like there wasn't really an expectation. Again, they'd all just kind of give you their book to read, like these VCs who had resources, and that's kind of all you'd get. But now these days, for different kinds of businesses, if you're doing fintech or healthcare or whatever it might be, there are very specific centers of excellence that these venture capital firms build, which are becoming incredible for getting through regulation, understanding limitations of your product. If you're making med devices, right? Like there's different. Some of these venture capital firms even like help you like into their if you're in California but you raise from a venture capitalist in Boston, they'll open up that network because that's a huge healthcare network, for example, right? And they'll actually plug you into events out there and make sure you're flying out there and getting like airtime on the right networks and resources. So venture capital should be seen not as just a way to get like a loan or get money, right? It should be seen as this form of like value add, which I think, again, at a time, people were just kind of like, well, just take it and figure that out later, right? But now it's actually, I think, more important because, again, you're giving away a portion of your company. And there are expectations that, especially if you give away too much of it, that like you can get forced out. A sale that you want to make cannot go through. Like there's a lot of really nasty things that could happen. I mean, there's also people who are overbearing, right? Which they could steer a company in the wrong direction because they're not from that world, but they claim they can help you because they've helped enough companies. So really understanding that strategic partnership is very important and how we're raising at Rex, right? Like just as an example, like we're going after people who understand that marketing is broken to some extent, and especially and there is more opportunities to democratize it, but there's definitely people who also like they just have never been part of that world. They've never hired a CMO. They've never worked with a CMO. So it's easy to just be like, that's like I'm just going to keep investing in, some generalist AI thing and not something that actually like does the product does the work for a product or for a store. So, having your narrative down helps that out a lot too, right? And making sure you can weed out people. But then, yeah, bootstrapping. I mean, there is value to understanding like putting in your own money in any business is a helpful thing, but also like really keeping, I mean, I think it was like MailChimp is a great example where I think they bootstrapped to like, I think hundreds of millions, right? I mean, this is now one of the world's largest newsletter distributing products. And they started off as like a side project that went crazy and now they've acquired their competitors. I mean, and I guess they were bought by Intuit, but it's insane how their rise was, they didn't raise venture capital for a while, but it allowed them, and I think especially their founders, to sell the company on their terms, grow the company on their terms, and not necessarily have outside pressure always. So I think there's an interesting, and again, I think even for when they were building, there weren't a lot of venture capitalists who could help them out with their problem either. They were just trying to be a newsletter infrastructure, and no one had really. People had built email, like people who had built Gmail and stuff before, maybe could have been interesting, but it's like it's harder to find a value add. But nowadays, there are a lot of people that can help you out with a specific problem and can get very specific just because of the rise of that world. But it's maybe talking about like really understanding, like, do you want that sort of advice or do you need it? And then do you want to give away that ownership? Or can you go for a while, at least bootstrap until you get to a certain point? And then because MailChimp did end up raising at some point when enough people were fitting their vision and their alignments. So it's like, yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I think the whole point of it is basically it should not be a limiting factor, similar to like the team thing. Like you shouldn't feel like you can't grow your business, because you're online or in person or whatever. It's the same thing here too. It's like you shouldn't feel limited by, oh well, I got declined that loan from a company, right? Like or from a bank, sorry, rather, and so I can't start my business. But like there are a lot of free tools more than ever, right? There's a lot of opportunities to leverage automation. AI is very democratized these days. Like being able to see how long you can go without having to raise capital or going into personal debt or commercial debt or whatever, right? Is something I want people to explore, right? Build that minimum viable product, minimum viable business, whatever it might be, and experiment a little bit, right? Before you decide to just try to like leverage. So yeah, some
Yeah, no,
interesting
that
thought
would,
there. Yeah,
yeah, that was great, and thank you for sharing that. I
of course.
appreciate you giving your opinion and being willing to share your
Oh yeah,
knowledge. And like you mentioned, not every business is the same. Most
yeah,
businesses have different things. So I think this is a great segue for us to talk about Rex. You
yeah.
mentioned it as like a CMO for any business that can
Mhm.
come in. I'd be curious to understand it in a simple terms. If I'm a business owner right now and you're pitching me, how would you pitch me the product and what would it look like in my business? Let's say I'm a coffee shop owner.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think that's so. The way I would really describe it, I kind of said it metaphorically earlier, but I can probably even dumb it down further. Is it is in a sense like a self-driving car for marketing, right? Where you can get you're not in the passenger seat though. You're sitting next to it, maybe, or behind it, but it's like there's something that's driving your business. If you're a coffee shop, for example, and that is like a an early use case that we probably will target, like these like in-person brick and mortar businesses. There's so much to worry about, right? Distribution, supply chain, seasonality in general, budgeting, like bookkeeping, everything is very much reliant on a couple of people, unless you're a big franchise, right? But if you're a coffee shop that like it's like one or two owners or something, and it's a family business or whatever, there's so much to worry about. And the idea of having a great social media presence, having a community relationship, whatever, I mean, it all sounds great, but when you look at how much work that takes, or the kind of people that you have to hire, or the kind of work that you have to, I mean, just even the mental load of having to think about that, it can get frankly very overwhelming. And so what we're building like Rex to be is essentially it plugs into your infrastructure to some extent, right? And for example, I can share like, Rex plugs into your like payment gateways, right? So it can see some level of like, trends in your business, trends in who your clientele is. If you're collecting, like if you have reward points or something, we'll integrate it into those things too. Again, so we can see profiles of who your customer is, where you're located. And then we're actually using, from our side, we're using like proprietary data sources that we have access to from, your like Nielsen's of the world or Statista or a lot of different places that look at not just like globally what the trends are, but from city to city, from, state to state, from country to country. Like it looks at a lot of different things that are going on and looks at what's kind of working for some people and what isn't for others, and helping you understand, okay, well, if you run this kind of ad, and by the way, Rex actually runs that ad for you too, but it gives you that roadmap, right? It says, if you invest this much money into advertising, if you approve this kind of content for social media, you should see a return of X. If you're okay with it, I'm going to go ahead and like set these things up for you and run it as a campaign. And you do that test. Maybe you see some things work, you don't. You can try it. Like, Rex has the capabilities to do things like A/B testing and run. It can pull back at any moment, right? It's not like, oh, now you're locked in. You have to keep running these ads, otherwise, like Rex doesn't work. It's like it can stop and start to your comfort. It can teach you and give you information and everything that like it's doing. And then it can also just give you general advice too, right? It's like it could just tell you, hey, like right now your business has been running for a couple of years. A really good way to get better marketing, get better like ad spend, or get better stuff out of your market, better outcomes out of your marketing, I should say, is to take a survey, right? Give every time people purchase your coffee, have a QR code next to it and ask people to like fill out some information. And that information can then be fed back into Rex to further your business and help it grow. So it's really it's a very personalized tool. I know it's not an elevator pitch I'm sharing, but I love talking about it. It's very much a personalized tool to both the founder and the business, or the user and the business, to really leverage like, what's your unique situation? What do your customers look like? Where are they coming from? What's your like geographic location? What's your demographic target? And helping you, literally just like get more customers, get more retention, get more people like actually seeing you as a member of seeing your business as a member of the community, right? And that's all a good, healthy recipe outside of like a recession or a pandemic. That's a good recipe to keep your business quite healthy and quite fed, from a growth standpoint. And Rex just kind of does it for you. So that's the fun of building it. Yeah.
And from a business owner's perspective, are there certain thresholds I need to meet to be able to leverage a product like this? Do I need a certain budget put to the side? What is the ideal customer at this current stage for Rex look like?
Right now, we're like primarily focused on, I would say like the threshold is more of like what we're going to have integrations into, which a lot of it is e-commerce related and more like online business related. So we'll get to physical like SMBs eventually too, but there's obviously that. In terms of being able to like use it, like not really. Like we'll have like a freemium plan, and like we'll have like your different overhead plans, which are like pay monthly to have access to certain features and certain integrations and things like that, which are not going to break the bank. By the way, we're not charging like tens of thousands. It's not a contract you have to sign. It's a SaaS model, like focusing on what's affordable and accessible for the market. So they're really, and in that regard, it could be like $0. It could be like millions of dollars. Really, Rex builds around your business, right? And so obviously, like to get access to certain features and certain things like that, it actually executes for you. There are higher tier plans which you'll have to pay for, and we're still a little bit in stealth. Like we're still going through our beta right now and paid pilots and stuff like that. But when we release to everybody, the goal truly is democratization. So to like answer like bluntly, like there is no minimum amount that you have to spend on. It's just what you want to get out of it, right? And we're going to have different tiers and different plans and flexibility. And again, it's the SaaS model, right? So you're not signing a contract to have your marketing only done by Rex for like 3 years. It's not an employee, right? It's not an agency either. It really is like a product that you come and go as you please, but it's what you put into it and how you leverage it. And it kind of, in the funniest way, Rex helps you leverage itself better in a sense where it teaches you about marketing as you go along, making you ask more questions, making you want to try more things. It's not a tool where you have to know anything about marketing, frankly, to use it at all. It's not like a Salesforce where you have to have experience in their own coding language and understand how CRMs work. Like Rex, like literally does all of that and explains all of that for you and generates as much of the interface as it can for you to still have control, right? Still approve things, still see where your money is going and where your ads are and stuff like that, but not necessarily have to worry about the nitty gritty details or have to be like an expert in it. So, yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
And I know you mentioned early on one of the driving factors for why Rex was created is that the marketing industry is somewhat broken. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and elaborate on because I know it is being in this
yeah,
world, but
of
I
course.
want to make sure the people that are listening and wondering why is it broken? What are things that aren't working? What was really the driver behind it all?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great that's a great point. And that's sort of a good topic to talk about. Is like so marketing is really broken right now because of the I think a lot of it has to do with the way people are tackling it from like day one and then what they stick to for a long time. Where like and that's like what we're seeing great with Rex is that we're finding a lot of success in like people who haven't hired necessarily like a marketing team or they're still early stages, but there's a lot of like I'll go to agencies specifically because that's really what we're trying to pull people away from is that these are marketing companies that come in and start charging like insane overhead off the bat, right? Just to have a team and an account manager for you. You check in with them once a week. They do, A/B testing is as fast as the humans can set it up for you. They are using some level of technology these days, but a lot of it is still very manual. It's a lot of PowerPoints and things to sift through. And your goal is to kind of sit back and just kind of let them like do what they want to. But it seems like the thing with marketing these days is that a lot of it is getting very, I would say, anecdotal, where it's like, in our opinion, things are doing well because coffee shops in general are doing it this way, right? But what we're trying to really defeat and what we're trying to go out and like really like the way we're going after them is focusing on the concept of marketing science as it stands, where it's like there's actual data now, right? There's actually a ton of data that's coming out all the time. And even stuff that like I said, that we have access to through different means and my co-founders and stuff who are very experienced in the marketing world. It's like we're seeing that there are a lot more specifics that you can go down, a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. But those agencies would usually turn that stuff around in like months, right? If they wanted to like look at a certain coffee shop's performance in like a city. And frankly, by the way, those thresholds get a lot higher with marketing agencies too, right? Where you have to pay them all this money out the bat, like out of the gate. And if your business is not doing well for a certain season, right, you'll have to cut off what you're doing, and that momentum can hit your all of your marketing right pretty hard. So I think there's just this weird cycle of like, and the same thing with like marketing employees. Like sometimes it's usually the first thing to go, and then you're not doing marketing actively for a while. So it seems like because of the sort of cycles and the way that people have been doing things for so long, like there isn't that a bit like there isn't that ability to move and pivot quickly to get marketing right. And there's a lot of starting and stopping and varying like things based on the industry, seasonality. And I think a lot of people just aren't feeling like their businesses are getting personalized enough marketing either. I think that's a big part of it is like all the stuff that you're seeing these agencies pump out seems to be they're just putting your company name and your revenue into like a boilerplate, but it's still pretty generic advice that like everybody else in their company is getting too. Whereas Rex is again, it's like it's really, really focusing on your exact problems, your concerns. It's educating you. And to be honest, like marketing agencies have no incentive to educate you on marketing, right? They want you to be like clueless and just letting them run on autopilot. Whereas Rex actually helps you understand why having some understanding can help you make you better decisions as a like help introduce new product lines, help introduce a certain new type of like copywriting or a new website or rebrand. Like these are all things that work together, which again, like an agency just like, if you want this information, pay more and more and more, while Rex focuses on a form of like democratization to some extent. And I think it's not to say all agencies are bad or like people can't use real people to run their marketing. It's just there's got to be something better that helps with that daily nitty gritty and understanding almost like just in time when a business owner needs to understand where their ad dollars might be going, what their marketing might look like, how to scale their business from a growth perspective, rather than again waiting for somebody to come back with them, especially when you look at larger agencies, which really just seem to be like they haven't changed their formula in like 30 years, which how could that be with the rise of technology, right? So it's a mix of things, but yeah, it's like it seems to be broken in the sense that it's just becoming out. Like I think people are allowing it to become outdated because they're not incentivized to bring it into the future, which is how a lot of things start, like Uber with taxis, Airbnb with like rental vacation rentals or any sort of like short term stays. Like it's kind of a fun thing to think about, like disruption, right? Not just like augmenting an industry, but actually seeing how much impact we can make because it hasn't been offered to a whole audience, right? It's usually too expensive or it's just not been moved forward very much outside of like the modern CRM, I guess that's like a big deal. And like, your newsletter and outreach tools and stuff. But there's a more fundamental thing I think missing there too. And we're going to try to solve that. So
This is all really exciting. And like you said, you're in stealth mode. So there wasn't a ton of information for me to gather before this
sure,
interview around Rex
sure.
and what you're building. Listening to you talk through this, I really do see this as a massive opportunity. And I'm excited I got to meet with you early in this
Yeah.
because it's always fun for me to get in front of founders and get to now be part of your journey and watch you
Hmm.
succeed. I think there's a huge need for this in the market. As a founder of a few small businesses, marketing is by far the hardest part. And it
Yeah,
is at least, and I know for most people it feels the same way. It is just a money pit and it is
it is.
constantly just blind throwing darts at the wall. A tool
Yep.
that actually integrates with what you're doing and educates you and shows you is something that I could see be valuable across almost any industry. So it's super
Exactly.
exciting to get to learn about what it's like actually behind the scenes building it. What is your goal and your team's goal for Rex in the next 5 years? Like 5 years from now, what is a
Ooh.
perfect view of Rex?
We would really like in the grand scheme of things, and it's kind of funny because we're already kind of seeing like weird demand for it coming from weird places, not just SMBs. We would love to be like when you look at doing like sort of a marketing agency or something else, Rex is going to be that something else, right? Where if you're considering like, do I hire a marketing department or like some sort of contract department to come in and just do this, or do I just have Rex? Like we would love to really, really scale that for any size business and any type of business and be almost in a sense like again, it's like this is you bringing in a something that's not a CMO in the same way of like a person who's executing it, but it's like we want to be seen as like an augmentation of having to hire unnecessary marketing teams and like spending unnecessary dollars and really being a serious option. I think the best to simplify that even further, like I would love to look at the concept of Canva. That's a huge business in the modern like business world and in the small business world, especially where big companies were like, oh no, we have contracts with Adobe and with everybody else. Like we can't possibly use Canva. And now it's like their whole like angle has gone to they have all these small businesses and also Fortune 500s who are like they literally democratize being able to create your own graphic design, right? And not having to hire graphic designers or having a place where you can collaborate with them, right? And so, while we are a different product from a point of like that has a more of a flexible creation standpoint, we want to emulate somewhat of that same feeling where it's like, this is another option. This is another way to do the work in the industry. And this is a form of growth that you can invest into and actually know where your money is going. So in the next 5 years, I think all that being said is like, we're focusing on democratizing it right now. The goal is mass democratization and disruption of how people tackle marketing in the industry from SMB, hopefully all the way up to enterprise, really. So that's the fun, but the climb. That's climbing Everest, right? That for a startup. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, definitely have goals to really see change and have it be part of the conversation when people are thinking about how to market what they're doing, right? So yeah,
This is amazing, and
yeah.
I can't wait to see it all play out. As we get here to the end of the interview, I always ask founders the same question. It's one of those cliche questions, but it always leads to some good answers.
Sure.
You've had a crazy ride from 15 to your age now.
Ooh,
If
yeah.
you could go back and talk to the 18-year-old you, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
That's an interesting one. It's pretty common. So at that time, like it's interesting because I'll mention that at that point I was already like a few years in and stuff, right? And that was around the time where like my first startup wasn't like failing, but it was starting to sort of like it was sort of stuttering a little bit after we had like the high of going to an accelerator was wearing off, and there were other things. So around the time, around the time I was turning 18 and onwards, like I think the advice that I would give is to it's like there was a sense of there was a lot of like imposter syndrome in the early days, right? There was a lot of this like, not, I didn't give up, but it was still like very easy to sort of self-sabotage myself a little bit from being able to be someone more than just a programmer or more than just a founder. Like you have to wear a lot of hats when you're in a business. And I think what would have helped a lot at that point too is like being consistently sort of confident. I know that's like easier said than done, but like I would have first pushed for that motivation to have stayed a little bit stronger. Maybe didn't couldn't have saved my business, but definitely could have helped like the mental state at the time because those things after being years in a business where things were going great and now they weren't, it was easy to be burned out very easily. So again, kind of like understanding that balance and giving myself that pep talk. But also the other thing I think too that I didn't invest more into, but should have outside of my network and stuff is or like the three pillars that I mentioned was actually the ability to sell too. That was the first business where I really learned it, but I didn't double down on it where I didn't know how to ask people for referrals. I didn't know how to make word of mouth sort of happen. I didn't know what inbound and outbound was outside of the definition of it. And I think if I went back in time, I would have been like definitely focused more on sales because that could have definitely helped out. Like just the concept of being a good public speaker and being someone who can sell productively and know how to talk their way. Like what is it, selling chewing gum at a broken jaw convention. Like I was on the right track, but I wasn't there because I wasn't and what it took was like for me it was a mix of experience, but also just like having that literature, reading. I didn't buy any courses or anything, but I didn't talk to salespeople at all. But I was only talking to engineers who are sadly people who know how to sell the worst, right? Because they talk too much tech and stuff. So I would have sort of flipped my trajectory there, where I probably would have rather than just trying to I'll build more features, they'll get more customers. It should have been more like how to sell and how to be more of a not just a community member, but actually know how to like ask people for more than help, but like, can we pilot you as a customer? Do you know someone who might be interested? Right. And like having those, going over those obstacles and focusing on it further. And I think that's unanimous across any business out there. I think that was a huge turning point when I got there. It wasn't at 18, but it was maybe not long after where I finally realized it. But I think it would have helped my startup quite a bit if and even previous ventures in terms of like speed of growth and velocity of growth, had I understood better on what that like and everything is marketing too, by the way. Everything is sales and everything is marketing to some extent in business. And so I wish I kind of knew that a little bit better rather than just, again, more features, more people, build it and they will come. Like that was already kind of like exiting the industry at the time. And now I think these days that's like that's not an option anymore. You can't just start a website and expect people to start showing up. Maybe a lot of bots, but like not real customers and not real people ready to convert. And again, I wasn't studying those things. I wasn't studying conversion. I wasn't studying like the sales pipeline at the time. And so, yeah, at 18, I would have definitely pivoted that way rather than over indexing on like product in that case. Each situation is their own, but that's the one thing that consistently has helped me out through my entire career now is that selling ability. Obviously programming too, but it's like, it's the nice addition when you're in my line of business. So, yeah,
I love it. And thank you for sharing all this.
of
I want to
course.
make sure before we jump off here that anybody listening, because obviously we talked about the importance of a
Yeah.
personal brand, can go
Yep.
and connect with you. What are the platforms that you're most active on and where can they find you?
Yeah, so like LinkedIn and Instagram, weirdly, like it used to be Twitter, but I don't know. The whole thing's different these days. My Instagram is at Nikhil Vimal, or sorry, at Nick Vimal at Nikvimal. So that's that one, and then Nikhil Vimal on LinkedIn. Rather, like if you look me up, I'm the only one in the world with that name, which is good. And yeah, they can connect with me on either platform, and I think it'd be great. I'm always happy to talk. I'm always like looking for new ways to advise startups that I work with and have cohorts that I basically run now of advisory and do like sessions and workshops and stuff. And yeah, and I definitely will be talking about the story of Rex as it continues to grow too, because that's a fun thing to talk about, like building in public a little bit. So yeah, that'd be best.
Amazing. And all of his information will be linked in the description wherever you're watching or listening right now. That's the episode. Nikhil, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been
Of
an
course.
absolute pleasure meeting you, and
Hmm.
we will see you all on the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much.